Hello everybody, welcome to this other project of mine, More Chainsaws Needed, where because I love horror and thrillers and suspense, I am going to talk, rant, rave, review and recommend horror stories for you guys as I draw. I swear, when I started this particular project, I was not planning to do two Asian horror focused videos on a row, but then Squid Game dropped on Netflix, and well, given how popular it became so fast and how interesting the use of the premise is, even if it is not exactly original, well, I just had to talk a bit about the whole subgenre of deadly games, and of course start with the Squid Game because I am not immune to the hype train. Then I had some many technical issues, so this video is a little late, but I think I still am on time before the inevitable second season. Because yes, Squid Game has some very interesting ideas, but even the use of children games in a deadlier fashion is not really that new. Even more, even some of the more specific points, which I will talk more about after the intro that I need to create, because really intros are very cool and give spoiler warnings because yes, there will be a lot of spoilers for Squid Game. So if you haven't seen it, this is your time to pause, go watch it, then come back. Well, some of those more specific points have been done before. However, just because an idea, a plot, a story has been done before, that doesn't mean it cannot be done differently or that new meanings cannot be added due to a different culture, a different time period, or even just a different time frame for the events. Say from 3 days to a month, from non-stop games with 1,000 players to a day with a group of 10 kids, and so on and so on. Even the difference of the games from something as simple as luck based as a lottery to a rat race in order to survive can change the intent behind everything. The reason the participants have to be involved, which sometimes is voluntary, sometimes not so much, also changes the final meaning. And that's not counting the people behind the games, who are not always crazy psychos, although that is the more common trope. But of course, to talk about all the variables would make this a 3-hour video, and no one has time for that. So I will focus completely on the Squid Game and just bring up a few other examples, trying really hard not to spoil anything else. So now, in the words of another game master that we will not discuss today, hello everyone, my name is AdalisaZ, and today I want to play a game. By this time, most everyone knows what the Squid Game is about because, well, it is the most popular and seen series in Netflix to date. But just in case you came back from a very secret trip to a hidden cave under a rock in Pluto, here's a very quick recap. In South Korea, a man called Gi-hun is invited to participate in a game where, should he win, he'd have more than enough money to pay all his debts and his mother's diabetes treatment. Of course, with such a juicy prize, he is not alone. Other 455 people are also there, and all of them have good reasons to try to win. So it's obvious that the contest will be hard. What no one expected was that when the rules said that the losers would be eliminated, they meant eliminated from the game known as life. As I said before, this is not a 100 original premise. We have had deadly game played in exchange of money stories before, deadly game played for an unspecified price, and of course deadly game played for the sick enjoyment of other richer people. I can list about 10 different examples of each, and that's not getting into the subgenre of teen killings each other in deadly games because grown-ups are psychos. But what makes the Squid Game special is that on one hand, how it applies those tropes to create a very Korean story that at the same time feels universal, and on the other, how it tries to subvert the problems that come with this particular premise, and sometimes how it manages to succeed. So let's start with the very first obvious problem and how Squid Games tries to overcome it. Because you see, when we're talking about deadly games, no matter how much the series and promos will tell you that there is no way you will guess the ending, we all know who is going to win the game by the nature of the premise. What do I mean? Well, we have a main character. And if we have a main character, then it's pretty obvious that they are going to survive until at least the last episode. Sure, there is the trope of the decoy protagonist, where we follow one person for a bit, only to find out to our shock that that person is not the real hero when they get mercilessly killed. But for some reason, this particular trick is never used in deadly game stories. We know who our main character is, and we know they are going to survive until the end, even if they don't win. Even worse, there are stories where we know that everyone else except maybe the antagonist are going to die before the end. Well, the antagonist and the romantic interest, because we are specifically told that there can only be one survivor. So getting attached to anyone, not obviously the two main characters, protagonist and antagonist, is kind of self-defeating, even if we do it all the time. The worst offenders are, of course, those stories where the characters are young. Obviously, Katniss was going to win the Hunger Games, and Shuya was going to be declared the winner of the Battle Royale. The fact that the long walk specifically follows one runner over everyone else is also a very good clue that they are going to at least see the finish line, and so on. So yeah, if you know the trappings of genre, you know that once we pass the red light, green light game, if Ji-hung is still alive, he's going to be the character we will follow, and thus he will be safe at least until the very last contest. Now, I want to make clear that this is not a bad thing. I mean, you'd need an amazing writer to pull a true anyone can die plot, which also makes you care for all the participants without giving away who is the main protagonist, or maybe do it from the point of view of the VIPs who watch the game, because there is always VIPs who watch the game. But no one wants to follow psychos who enjoy seeing people die in horrible ways, and following every single contestant in order to make us care for all is, in theory, possible, but depending on the number of contestants and the time needed would make this hypothetical series unbearably long. So yes, we know from day one that Gi-hun is going to live, probably even win, once we are made aware that no matter if the rules state that there can be multiple winners, the organizers are kind of stacking the odds in favor of just one survivor. So what does Squid Game do to overcome that little unavoidable spoiler? Well, give the rest of the story all they got in order to make you not really care for the fact that you know that Gi-hun is surviving, but wonder how the hell is he going to do so, and if he will be able to save as many people as he wants once he starts picking up allies. They also give us one hell of an antagonist, one that is spelled out as the bad guy from moment one, but it's so well written and surrounded by so many great secondary villains that it's easy to ignore that he is the real foil to Gi-hun. Here, Squid Games takes a lot of advantage of the nature of the game. If you ask anyone who is the villain of the piece, who is the big bad, well, we mostly agree that it's the creator of the game. Possibly followed by the frontman, who is the one who enforces the game and its rules, even as he claims that the game suffers true equality to its participants, which is absolutely not true. And of course, we have the villains among the participants, those who are obviously willing and ready to kill, not just in the game but outside of it, just for their own gain. Among those, I think that the most memorable and hated is, of course, Yang Deok-soo. But even the man who beat another contestant to death on camera is not our true antagonist. Because see, our antagonist is the one character who is the foil, the dark reflection of our protagonist. It's right there in the names. And in the deadly game genre, the hero rarely, if ever, gets to face the creator of the games. There are a few exceptions here and there, especially when we get into second and third parts, but when the game is a metaphor to the unjust society where we live, as it is in the Squid Game, the organizer is more often than not untouchable. Jihan will get to face the creator of his torture, yes, and he's a very good foil to the cruelty of a man who saw a game as innocent as the honeycomb and decided to make it completely deadly. But that is not the main confrontation because by that time the creator's philosophy has already been beaten, long before the first game was over. And yes, I should put a pin on that to talk about it later. But basically, remember that the big bad thinks that mankind is inherently selfish, that no one would help a homeless person or someone else without having something to gain. And that is pretty much blown to bits in the very first game when Ali saves Gihan, a complete stranger that would not help Ali in the slightest at that point in time. Anyway, the real foil for Gihan is one that is originally presented at his ally and his friend, at the same time that the series is screaming at us that we're dealing with someone as evil as Deoksu, even if a bit more discreet. I am talking about Chu Sang-woo. We first met Sang-woo as he complains that they were kidnapped, and we get a laundry list of his crimes, which are, mostly, white collar crimes. Embezzlement after he lost a huge fortune to bad investments, and, well, stealing from his clients, which in turn make him amass a debt in the millions of dollars. Once outside, he's even being chased by the police, which is something that we don't see even for the criminal Deoksu, who has his own problems, but that's for another time. And well, we all know that, at least in the real world, white collar criminals are not exactly nice. Exactly, cat. But immediately after, we are told that he is Jihon's childhood friend, and well, he also figures a strategy to survive the red light, green light game that he shares with Gihon. So he has to be nice, right? Except that his strategy consists on using others as human shields, and he's not the one who saves Gihon in the first game. Gihon's savior was Ali. This contrast of telling us we shouldn't trust Sang-woo and then making the characters trust him, and Sang-woo then helping them to be in a position to be saved, continues in the second game and in the third. Thanks to the info that he gets from Kang Sebyok, Sang-woo realizes immediately what the second game is, and he positions himself to be one of the winners. Yes, he seems to consider warning Gihan, but in the end he doesn't. And at that point, he doesn't know Il-nan or Ali at that, so there was no reason for him not to try and convince them to change places with his childhood friend, but he doesn't. And the director makes damn sure that we know that he was calculating his own chances if Gihon survived. And this was even clearer in the third game. Just like Deoksu, Sang-woo wanted to fill his team with strong men and agreed to keep Il-nan and Sebyok because he knew that if he didn't, well, then he risked losing both Ali and Gihon. And even before he knew what the game was, he suspected Ali's strength would be useful. And once again, yes, he comes up with the winning strategy, but he only got the chance because of Il-nam's and Gihon's insistence to listen to Il-nam. Later on, however, when Ali claims that it was Sang-woo who saved his life, Sang-woo gladly takes the credit, and he even throws that back into Ali's face during the fated fourth game. Which is, of course, when we, the audience, can't ignore anymore that Sang-woo represents a lot of bad things, because by now we also know that the real reason behind Gihon's situation had absolutely nothing to do with his apparent gambling addiction. Where Sang-woo made and lost a fortune using and abusing people, like Gihon and Ali, who are the working class, Gihon lost his job precisely because some big-name banker decided to close the factory where he worked. It wouldn't be even surprising at this point if it had been Sang-woo himself who caused that. So of course Sang-woo would use Ali, and then betray him by telling him that he, the smart banker, knew how to rig the game in his favor. The narrative pretty much told us it was going to happen from the moment Ali saved Gihon, a stranger to him, while Sang-woo, the childhood friend, watched from safety. And once that it's settled, the fate of everyone else is set in stone, because right then and there is when the Deadly Game narrative pretty much dictates that the last two survivors, who will face each other in the last match, will be Gi-hun and Sang-woo, no matter what. There is also a very interesting parallel there between how Gi-hun and Sang-woo approach Game 4, as it is when the pairings that are formed in Game 1 are broken. Remember how Gi-hun befriended Il-han and tried to protect him? Well, of course Gi-hun was going to face having Il-han's death in his hands. And just like Sang-woo, he starts predictably by trying to fool the man who has seemingly lost his marbles into losing his marbles and make sure Gi-hun survives. But where Sang-woo doesn't really touch his heart and reconsiders trying to save Ali, Gi-hun is faced directly with the fact that Il-han not only knew that what Gi-hun was doing, but that he forgives him. Il-han here takes the role of the older generation, telling the younger one that it's okay to let go. It's okay to make the sacrifice in order to keep going. Would Ali have done the same? We don't know. But it is very telling that every member of the Gi-hun team here is forgiven by the dead partners. There is a lot we could talk about the way in which Ji-young walked into the game fully ready to die and was just trying to spend the last day with a friend. Except for Sang-woo. And Sang-woo missed being forgiven by Ali, not because Ali wouldn't forgive him, but because the way in which Sang-woo won made it impossible for Ali to do so, as they didn't reach the end of the day together, because Sang-woo, like many other bankers who have sent poor people to their doom, simply didn't want to see the result of his actions. We even see how heartless Sang-woo is when, in the same scene, he goes from berating Gi-hun for crying over Il-han's death because player 69 saw his wife lose against him in the marbles game, to basically in the same breath claim that 69 is a loser for wanting to leave and that he should be the one that died instead of his wife. No surprise for anyone when, that same night, 69 kills himself, but Sang-woo doesn't seem to feel guilty at all. Now, yes, I know that Il-han was not really in danger, and that in his mind, the fact that Gi-hun tried to fool him into giving all his marbles probably proved his stupid theory that everybody in the universe is only looking for themselves, and so he was very happy about it. But that doesn't change the perspective from Gi-hun's point of view or our point of view before the big reveal about Il-han. Neither does the fact that at the end of the day, Gi-hun was repenting and he was regretting fooling Il-han. But again, that's a lot of more complicated issues. This is also why it's very obvious that Sang-woo would end up killing Sae-byok. Once we were down to 3 out of those 6 original sympathetic characters, there was only one way Sae-byok would be taken out of the game without it being a repeat of the sacrifices the other made, and it's her death what marks Sang-woo's complete turn to the dark side, especially when she saves Gi-hun at the beginning of the bridge, where she is also hurt due to just bad luck and script contrivances. Even if later on there is an attempt for redemption, Sang-woo, just as the previous game winner, the frontman, is there to protect the status quo, which is, at the end of the day, the real evil. Which of course is why, once we have Il-han out of the way, we meet the BAP. They are all foreigners to Korea, wearing golden animal masks, elegant robes, and nothing else. They are the most heinous people in the show, bar none, who make crude jokes at the players, using other human beings as furniture and even sexually assaulting the guards who are serving them. But it's very telling that the host, who according to the BAPs always watched the two events with them, is not there. It's quite telling because it's a very small but obvious clue in hindsight. If we had heard the host's voice for a long time, we would ruin the ends for ourselves if we hadn't been paying attention. Now, here I would love to pause and talk a little bit more about the interesting use of the female characters in the series. Unfortunately, I promised I would try and keep things short, and we are already in the 20 minutes mark, so I apologize, I won't do it. Still, let's not leave unnoticed that Han Mingnyo, despite being one of the most annoying players, also had one of the most badass and dignified deaths in the whole show. There are many possible ways to analyze the Squid Game, but the clearest is the class war. And again, that is why we were going to end up with Sang-woo versus Gi-hun, and why Gi-hun wouldn't want to win by being his friend's murderer, even after all the evil Sang-woo had done. The message of that last battle is so clear and so unsubtle that it could just be written with the subtitles. The ones who cause the social and economic inequality are the 1%, the depraved rich elite who enjoy seeing the poor and desperate fight to death and die in childish games. And the only ones who can actually stop the system are the poor. If we decide all together to stop playing the game that we are forced to play, to walk away from the whole thing, even if it means that we won't see any reward for our efforts. Gihan is perfectly ready to do so. Once his anger at Sang-woo is gone, he just wants to go home, money be damned. It's an act that the BAP cannot comprehend, and neither can Sang-woo, who, lest we forget, doesn't have the same needs as Gihan. Gihan has his sick mother, and he's going to lose his kidneys. But Sang-woo only has the threat of jail, since now he already knows his mother knows his troubles, and so he doesn't have to pretend for her anymore. And thus, Sang-woo dies, in appearance for his friend, but in truth, he dies for the system, just as Il-hoo, the front man, once he won, remained to make sure that the game continued. Because the 1%, the BAP, must be entertained, and thus the 99% must keep fighting each other as we are told that we are our own enemy. And if we just fight more for the illusion that one day we can get that prize money, we will become part of that 1%. And we have to hope not to get our hands dirty in the process. As I said at the beginning, the Squid Game is nothing new or special. But there is a reason why it was Netflix's most popular series so far. Well, so far when I was starting to record this, now I believe there is a new series in town. It's not just because the Korean directors really know how to film ultraviolence in a way that makes people want to keep watching, or because despite the predictability of the situation, they still managed to bring a couple of surprises to the table. It is because it hit at the best time when, because of the pandemic, the divide between the ones who control the game and the ones who are forced to play it became far more obvious. Now, if you got here and still haven't watched the series, I still recommend you give it a chance if you like Deadly Game series. There are a few scenes, mostly in the games, but also on some of the most quiet moments, that are a whole masterclass in filmmaking. And let's be truthful, the whole Ilham arc, when you don't know the genre, is also incredibly good at foreshadowing. When you know the genre, unfortunately, the foreshadowing becomes really obvious, but that's a different thing. As I pointed out, the series spoils itself, not just with Ilhan, but with a lot of more things, from the first moment. But it's still interesting to see how they're playing with that, how they get to keep things interesting. Just don't expect any uplifting great ending. They might surprise us with season 2, but what we have has the precise downer ending one would expect from a deadly game where there can only be one survivor. Well, when people convince themselves that there can only be one survivor. And well, I really hope that season 2 tells us the biggest answer to that we need. That is, why the hell the front man didn't pay his rent for 2 weeks. I am really angry at that little point. Anyway, I want to thank my dear patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Hu, and Jessic, as well as my first supporter, Tanya Pineda, and the amazingly wonderful Ami Song, without whom this video wouldn't be possible. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Adalisa, with a link on description, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with $1 a month, you will always be thanked in all my videos, as well as get access to them and a ton of art before anyone else, and get the chance to suggest future subjects for videos. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, comments so that the algorithm catches engagement, and of course, you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, comments, and suggestions in the comments below. This was AdalisaZ, and remember, there's not a problem in the horror genre that cannot be solved with more chainsaws.